Hello class and welcome to week 3. I wanted to take this opportunity to review with you what we are going to cover in chapters 5 and 6. Just some key items. It doesn't mean that that's everything we're going to cover. Obviously, you'll see everything in the lecture. But just to give you a heads up as to the key information that's in these two chapters. As I said in week 1, the first exam is on chapters 1 through 6. Chapters 1 and 2, the match game, was posted on the website so that you can complete it as a practice. You should have that done. 3 and 4 have been covered. This is 5 and 6 that we'll be going over this week. So you'll be doing the match game for 5 and 6. Just to give you some background as to what you can and cannot do for the exam. Those of you that are online, the exam will be in Respondus. Those of you that come to class, you're on site, the exam will be in class. Either side, either class, either online or on site, has the opportunity to complete 1 page of notes, and that's 2-side, 8.5 by 11, to use for the exam. Those of you that are online, you will have a certain time frame. I don't know if I'm going to put a time frame. I want to for the exam in Respondus, but I don't know. Sometimes Respondus gets a little tricky where if you try and go into the exam and you have any technical issues, it continues to time you, and I don't want that to happen. But either way, you have to know the material. So if you have 1 page of notes, I'm trusting you that that's all you have. You really will find it difficult to do otherwise. If you're online, again, you're using Respondus, you don't need a Scantron. If you're on site, bring a Scantron and a pencil. So these are the last 2 chapters before you have your first midterm. A couple of other things I want to mention about the homework. People are submitting homework, and this is for the on-site, but it will also apply to the online class. If you're submitting either of the written assignments without citations, you're going to lose points. You need to cite your work. I had someone send me an email and say, well, we're all using the book, so why do we have to cite? Citing is not about the book. Citing is about you supporting what you are including in your writing, and that's APA format. Somebody else sent me an email and said, well, I don't know why we're using APA. It doesn't require page numbers. Go back and review APA format because, yes, it does. If there's any questions you have about APA, I do have all the information behind the syllabus link on Blackboard, so please review that material. What I'm doing is I'm prepping you for the paper. I want you to practice so that you don't lose 200 points for a paper because you've not cited and you've not completed it correctly. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions on that. Okay, let's look at chapter 5. Now in 3 and 4 we talked about attitudes, we talked about emotions and moods. Now we're going to get into personality, which is always fun because everybody has a different personality, right? So let's start out on page 137. We're going to talk about personality. You will see me mention some percentages as we go through the material. Please make sure you make notes on those because more than likely there will be questions about any kind of percentage number, and I throw those in exams to make sure that you're paying attention to the material, watching the recordings, reading the book. Okay, so we start out with personality, defining what that is. As we go forward, we get into heredity, and there's always been that discussion, if personality is hereditary, then I can't change it. And well, no, it's not. Well, then I can change it. So that discussion always brings up some good, some interesting comments. The Myers-Briggs indicator, sip of water. You know this is live, right? There's no doubt in your mind this time. The Myers-Briggs indicator is there. And also a little conversation about, and we've talked a little bit about emotional stability and emotion contagion and emotional intelligence. This chapter gets into also the Big 5 personality model, and you'll see that on page 140, 141. Myers-Briggs is on page 140. If you look on 143, you see Exhibit 5.2. And I'm trying to mention exhibit numbers so that if you have a different version of the book, you'll see where, okay, I'll look for Exhibit 5.2. It's not on 143 in my book. Maybe it's 142. I don't know. But you'll be able to find it. So here's Exhibit 5.2 on 143. Gives more detail on the big 5 traits, and we'll be talking about those. The dark triad, or triad, whichever way you say it. This is on page 144. We'll be talking about that. Any other personality attributes? Core self-evaluations on page 146. Self-monitoring on 147. What does it mean to have a proactive personality? And this is on page 148. The situation strength theory is on 149. Trait activation theory on 150. And then we're going to get a little bit into values, because that's another part of personality. What's your value system? What do you hold as valuable? And that starts on page 151. Terminal versus instrumental values are on 152. And on 154, it's kind of interesting because we always talk about fitting the person in the job, but it also talks about fitting the person in the organization. So that's something else that's important. We're going to talk about that. There's a lot of discussion on page 156 about Hofstede. You'll see some terms, in fact, power distance we talked about before. Individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, those kinds of things we'll be talking about. And these are all on page 156. And that's pretty much the end of chapter 5. The questions for review are on page 161. And we'll flip a few more pages here to get to chapter 6. So now we're getting into perception and individual decision making. So you can kind of see, and I like to keep these chapters all together for that reason, because you start out talking about emotions and moods and personality and values and perception and attitudes and individual. Now we're looking at how all these things affect how you make decisions, which really is a great culmination to everything that we've been talking about. So let's look at perception. That's on 171. What is that? There are a lot of different factors that influence perception, and we'll talk about those. Attribution theory on page 173. A lot of good things we'll be talking about with that one. The fundamental attribution error and the self-serving bias on page 174. We'll be talking about those as well. What's kind of interesting on 175, selective perception. So we select certain ways that we feel about certain things or certain people, and those are there as well. The halo effect, the contrast effect, and of course stereotyping on 176. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Know that this has also a name called the Pygmalion effect. This is on the exam, so know the two names for it. It's self-fulfilling prophecy or Pygmalion effect. On 178, the book starts to get into the link between perception and individual decision making. So when you think about why you make decisions and how your perceptions determine that, think about it. When you have a problem, the way you perceive the problem is going to determine how you make the decision to resolve it, ignore it, ask someone for help, as an example. Those kinds of things we're going to talk about. The steps in the rational decision-making model are on page 179 at the bottom. So if you want to review those, that's a good idea. Intuitive decision-making on 181. The book gets into a lot of discussion, starting on the bottom of 181. The different biases and errors in decision making. So if we start on 181, goes through 182, 183, 184. So those are worth reading over before you come to class, as is anything, because you can be much more in tune with what we're discussing. There are also individual differences that the book talks about, and this starts on page 185. There are organizational constraints. So the organization can sometimes determine how decisions are made based on your perception of the organization and what they're doing. And last but not least, we're going to talk about ethics in decision making. So what determines an ethical situation, and what are the different perceptions regarding ethics? There's a different approach, I guess is the good word, which also gets into whistleblowers. You know what those are. And lying is on page 190. On 191, creativity, the three-stage model of creativity, and creative behavior. So what makes something creative? What kind of behavior is involved in being creative? On page 193, the causes of creative behavior. And that's pretty much the end of chapter 6. As always, let me know if you have any questions. Again, I'm throwing this out there so that you have an idea of what we'll be discussing this week. Let me know if you have any questions. Please upload your documents to Blackboard. Another email I've been getting, and I apologize, I just thought of this. If you upload your document to Blackboard and it's uploaded correctly, you will be able to see it immediately. I mean, it might take 30 seconds, let's say, but you will be able to view it. So don't send me an email asking me if I can view it, because if you can view it, I can view it. There's a new thing in Blackboard, and I don't know what that's all about. It's called Box. I don't know if it's just me, but it's making it difficult for me to add comments to the documents themselves. I can do it, but it's a little flag where you can't see the comment until you open the flag. That drives me crazy. I want you to be able to see it when you open the document at a glance, you know. So you may see me put more comments into the little comment box. The other thing too, someone asked me, can I just copy my paper into the comment box, the text box? No, I need to have you upload the document. Okay, that's all for now. Chapters 5 and 6. Get ready for that exam. Take notes, come to class, watch the recordings, and that's it for now. Bye-bye. See y'all.